Hey there, thank you so much for watching, for listening. Love to have you subscribe. This is a great channel, fun content, very helpful, makes you think, gives you some good application, and we have great interviews as well. So, of course, I want you to subscribe and love to have you share this series with your friends. It's a great series on lessons for starting. And this week we're going to finish our lessons for starting. And we've been looking at Jacob, Moses, and Jesus for these lessons. We're going to continue looking at them. And I would say that today's lesson for this episode is that you keep going. It's interesting. I was thinking about this the other day. You go to the gym. If you go to any gym in January, particularly the first 2 weeks of January, gyms are usually packed because everybody's deciding to turn over a new leaf, start a new season in there, and we're going to exercise, we're going to, have discipline, we're going to lose weight, we're going to be healthy, we're going to be fit. And so, everybody's motivated, particularly the first in January. But as you keep going over the course of time, the people kind of weed out. By the time we get to February, there's fewer, March less. By the time you get to August, September, almost nobody's in the gym, especially compared to January. You're like, well, they're all outside. Maybe, but a whole lot of us also quit. And that's today's lesson, is keep going. Whatever you started, keep going. Keep doing it. So Jacob stayed in motion. When he was living with his mom and dad, he had a big run-in with Esau, made his dad super angry. He left and he had a dream at Bethel meaning the house of God. And in the dream, he saw Jacob's ladder, angels going up and down, ascending, descending on this ladder. And God said to him, I'm going to look after you and I'm going to protect you, take care of you, provide for you until I bring you back here. So Jacob left Bethel and moved to Laban, his uncle, who was deceptive as all get out. I mean, if Jacob was deceptive, he was just an apprentice compared to Laban. Laban was the professional deceiver, deceptive. And so, but he lived for Laban for 20 years, but he didn't stay there. He left Laban. He knew after 20 years, and God spoke to him and says, it's time to leave. And he left. He stayed in motion. He kept consistent and steady with God's plans and purposes. He kept going. And then finally, you watch him. He wrestles at night with the angel, and he gets renamed Israel, moves into the promised land. And after that, after many years, he moves to Egypt. He stays in motion. He doesn't quit. He continues to stay fresh in his compliance and his obedience with God. I think it's important for us to keep going. Don't quit. Put in disciplines and structures and systems and places so that you can keep going. Whatever things that God has started in your life, keep doing. Keep staying in that consistency, within that flow with what God has done. We see what Jacob did. And then Moses. I think it's really important for us to think about Moses' actions and his choices. At the burning bush, long conversation between him and God. There's a couple of chapters of that conversation. But once Moses has that conversation and has that beginning, that starting, that launch, he keeps going. So he puts in motion what God tells him. And even when there's resistance and when there's pushback and obstacles, Pharaoh wasn't super excited about Moses showing up. And some of the Israelite leaders weren't very excited about Moses popping on the scene. There were some obstacles. There was some resistance, some hardships, some struggles. And when the Israelites left on the Passover night, on the early morning, the Egyptians were like, good riddance. And they poured all kinds of wealth on the Israelites, and the Israelites left. And then there was problems because Pharaoh wanted to chase them down. I got rid of all my free labor. I got to bring them back. So Pharaoh chases them, and then the Israelites are freaked out because they're like, oh, you let us out here to be killed by Pharaoh. They're mad at Moses. But Moses just keeps going, keeps walking, keeps steady, keeps consistent in God's plan, God's direction, what God started in him. Moses doesn't stop. He just keeps going. And of course, Jesus is a perfect example. And I like that Jesus stayed in motion with God's plans and purposes for his life. So let me give you an example. In Matthew chapter 4, at the very beginning, it says that Holy Spirit led Jesus into the wilderness. And when Jesus was in the wilderness, he was tempted by Satan. He was there for 40 days and 40 nights, had fasted. And at the end, Satan tempted him 3 times, different ways. But he stayed in motion. He let Holy Spirit lead him and guide him and direct him. He let the angels minister to him. And one of the things I would say to you is, just because God leads you into something doesn't mean you won't have struggles and resistance and hardship and struggle, difficulties. Just because God leads doesn't mean you won't have obstacles. When God leads, you will have obstacles. And I find it's interesting. Sometimes when the devil leads, it's the path of least resistance. Oftentimes, it's easy, it's smooth, it kind of leads to a bad conclusion, into destruction, but it can be very alluring and appealing and seem very smooth. And I think we have to be conscientious that just because there's difficulties doesn't mean that that's God not leading us. Sometimes the resistance and the difficulties is the enemy trying to obstruct and trying to divert us from staying consistent and staying in the launch from the starting point and continuing in that same direction, in that same path. So I just encourage you, as you think about this year, think about the things that God has started, dreams that God has put in your heart, and your motion and the choices that you're making and the decisions you're making to walk into that. But also stay consistent, stay steady with that, and watch and see what God does. Watch and see how God overcomes obstacles. God gives you strength on the inside. God gives you miracles. God gives you supernatural favor, alignment, coincidences. I just think that God is absolutely breathing fresh things into you this year and opening up new things for you, as well as blessing the things that He's put in your heart and in your life. So thank you so much for subscribing. Hit the notification bell right there. Keep you posted when we put up new content. And here's a question for you to think about. What is something you want to achieve this year? What's a goal that you have for this year? Not this month, this year. What would you like to achieve? Some people set out to do like an exercise goal. Some people set out to do an education goal. Some people set out to read a book every month or something, or I don't know, but there's goals. What are some things you want? What's something you want to achieve this year? Just leave that in the comments. It'd be fun to read that and kind of have some interaction with you there. And here's your final joke. An old Japanese gardener asked me what I know about bonsai trees. And I said, very little. Okay. Next week will be lots better. Thank you.